Hey everybody, it's Liz from West Star Tarot, and today I'm doing a VR to Tammy Pie, where I originally saw this tag, but then as I watched Tammy's video, I realized that the tag actually originated from Hermit's Cave, Simon at Hermit's Cave, and this tag is called Tarot Journey Through Decks. And we are to, there are 4 prompts: beginning, so the deck that started you off on your journey; middle, deck or decks that came along that really changed and deepened your practice; and then the now, which are decks that you're enjoying using now and that are continuing to deepen your practice now. And then we have the 4th prompt is called Milestones. And these are decks that were just that, milestones in your tarot journey. And Simon says that we can sprinkle those around throughout the video, or just do them at the end or whatever. But I think I'll be sprinkling those in. So one of the things that I noticed as I was watching first Tammy's video, and then Simon's, and then I also watched Elaine at, I think her channel is Tarot Tats and Tea, something like that, was that they all told stories about the decks and how these decks came into their lives and what their lives were like at the moment that they, or at the time that they were using the decks. And it got me to thinking about something that I really feel is an important part of being a good tarot reader. So that is being a good storyteller. You know, if you throw out a few cards and, you know, say it's the Ace of Cups, the Eight of Wands, and the Justice, and you give the rote meanings or traditional meanings of those cards, but you in no way weave them together. You don't tell a story that answers the querent's question, then what good is the reading? I mean, the querent themselves can go get a tarot book and look up the meaning of cards. You know, for us to be good tarot readers, we need to contextualize the cards and interweave the meanings of the cards so that they tell a story that addresses and answers the querent's issue or question. So I think it's important to be able to be a good storyteller. That is a part of being a good tarot reader. And I have never had a tarot reading from any of those 3 folks I mentioned, but I bet they are good tarot readers because all of them told really interesting stories about how they acquired the decks that they mentioned and what the decks meant to them on their tarot journey. So anyway, I have a feeling that this is going to be a long one. I have piles of decks in front of me on a very small table, so I may be fumbling and bumbling about here, so apologies in advance, bear with me. But my first tarot deck, I got my first tarot deck in 1985-ish. It might have been a year or 2 before that, but it was no later than then. I was in graduate school at the time. I was living on Cape Cod, Massachusetts, where I live now, a different house or home, but same area. And I was going to graduate school in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And I would go up, depending on the semester, I would go drive up to Cambridge once or twice a week. And I would go up and, for the day, the classes were in the evening, and I would go to the library and finish my reading, finish my homework, do what I needed to do with my schoolwork. And then I would take a walk around Harvard Square. So, do you want me to say it in a Boston accent? I will. Harvard Square. Anyway, I would walk around Mass Ave into Harvard Square and out towards Porter Square. And I would go into, there were so many wonderful metaphysical and occult bookstores. And I would get, something for lunch or dinner. And then my favorite store to stop in was called Arsenic and Old Lace. And you have to realize this was 40 years ago. This was 1985. And so it wasn't like every other person you met called themselves a witch or a tarot reader. It just wasn't like that. There was no internet, so there was no way for folks to connect together. And, there just weren't that many of us, and there weren't that many shops, and there was no online shopping. So you had to go to a bricks and mortar store. So anyway, I would, go into Arsenic and Old Lace. It was owned by these two women, one of whom was getting a PhD in theology from Harvard. And so again, this is 1985. Her focus of study and her dissertation was on tarot. It was about tarot, which, nowadays if someone told me that, I wouldn't really blink an eye. But 40 years ago, at a sort of staid, conservative institution like Harvard Divinity School, someone getting a PhD in tarot was pretty interesting. So I used to chat with her when I would, go in and out of the shop about her studies and about tarot. And I really wasn't that attracted to tarot. At the time, I was into, goddess, spirit, women's circles and goddess, exploring different goddesses, crystals. I was studying my herbal studies and, candle magic and those types of things. And Arsenic and Old Lace was a shop that, catered to all of that. But they also had books and tarot decks. Like I said, the standard tarot deck, the traditional classic tarot deck, the Rider-Waite-Smith, Marseille, didn't appeal to me. It was too male, too white, too patriarchal. It just didn't appeal to me. And then one day I was in Arsenic and Old Lace, and I came across this deck. And I was like, well, wait a minute, that's round. That's a round deck. What is that? And they always had samples of the decks out. So I took a look at it, and I realized, I'm going to do it this way. Oh my goodness, it's a tarot deck. Oh my goodness, it's inclusive. Oh my goodness, it's feminist. Well, who knew? So, of course, I snapped it right up because, I thought that I wasn't interested in tarot, but I guess I just wasn't interested in those traditional kind of more patriarchal, male, white centric decks. But this deck really, really interested me. And so I picked it up and I took it home. They also had the book. So that's my original deck. That deck is 40 years old. And they also had the guidebook. Well, my guidebook is literally falling apart. It's been read, reread, I mean, and it's really interesting. Like, I was going through this last night when I was pulling things out to figure out what decks I wanted to use. And in this book, I found a bookmark from Cody's books on Telegraph Ave in Berkeley. Not sure how that ended up there, Berkeley, California. And then I found pieces of paper with readings that were done years and years ago, outlines for a spring equinox ritual from the 80s. When I got this deck, I spent a lot of time doing readings for, I'll call her my soul sister, Pauline. And Pauline and I would read for each other. Pauline was familiar with the Rider-Waite-Smith and had read Waite's book. So she knew more about tarot than I did. I was a complete novice. And, you know, I would look things up in the book. And anyway, my dear friend Pauline, who I journeyed through feminism and occultism and goddess ritual and tarot and all kinds of things. I journeyed with her from the late 70s until, sadly, Pauline passed away in 2019 in a sudden accident. And so this deck means even more to me because I feel like it connects me to her. And one of the things I found, let me see if I can find it, inside this book was a handwritten reading in Pauline's handwriting that she did for me in 1992. So, I mean, I just love having that. And anyway, that's the deck that started my journey. I used it, like I said, my friend Pauline and I would read for each other. In 1990, I joined a women's circle, and we had like a women's spirituality group that met regularly. And on the holidays, we would, and other times, but specifically on the holidays, we would pull cards from the Mother Peace deck, and because I think I might have been one of the only people with a tarot deck. I'm not sure. So I dabbled in tarot, but I didn't do like really dive into it. So that deck I got in 1985, and then in 1988 or 89, I was at an herb conference near Boston called, it wasn't named at the time, but it became Rosemary Gladstar's International Herbal Symposium, which Rosemary held for many, many years. And there were wonderful herbal teachers from across the United States and around the world, from Hawaii, from Great Britain, from Africa, from South America, just, you know, all over the place. Polynesia, I think, anyway, all over the place. And so they had a vending hall, and I was walking through the vending hall, and I came across this on one of the herbalist tables. It's called the Herbal Tarot, and it's by Michael Tierra. It's a U.S. Games. And I thought to myself, holy shit. A tarot deck? An herbal tarot deck? Like, what? Two of my favorite things that I'm so loving and inspired by. So Michael Tierra is an herbalist who is a TCM herbal practitioner, and he came up with this idea of connecting an herb with a tarot card. So there's 78 herbs in this deck, and the art is by Candace, and I can't remember her last name. I also have the book. There's a nice guidebook, and you can look the cards up. It tells the it talks about the connection between the herbs and the tarot card meaning. And it gives the meaning of the tarot card. It gives the medicinal healing information about the herb. And then it also gives the magical connection or meaning of the herb. So I bought that deck. So this was my second tarot deck. I bought that several years after Mother Peace. And I would use that in conjunction with my herbal studies. And then in 1990, I was no longer in graduate school, but I did still go up to Cambridge from time to time and to visit my lovely, beautiful Arsenic and Old Lace, which I wish it was still open, but it's not, unfortunately. And I came across this deck. So this became my third tarot deck. And this is the Daughters of the Moon. This is the original, I'm going to do it this way so I don't put them upside down. This is the original one. It was made by a feminist collective of artists. Fiona Morgan was the person who conceived of the idea and kind of was the main artist. And she authored the guidebook with some other folks who are prominent in feminist studies and women's spirituality. And they came up with this deck. As you can see, it's black and white. If you see on this side, you can see how shiny it is. The front is flat, and it's just unlaminated paper. And the idea was to leave it black and white so that when you bought the deck, you could color it in yourself. So I cannot tell you how many times I sat down with pastels or colored pencils or markers to color in my deck. But as you can see, I never did. And that's because I have zero artistic training and no artistic talent. And I was just so afraid that I was going to ruin the deck, so I never colored it in. And I'm actually now really glad that I didn't, because several years after this deck came out, the Daughters of the Moon Collective published a full color version of it. And that's the one that I use now. I have both of them. This is just sort of a special, this is what the cards look like. This is the box for the colored version. And this is what the full color version looks like. So those were my first 3 tarot decks. And those were the decks that I had. I did get a Goddess Oracle deck around that same time, but those were the only decks I had for years. So fast forward to now the middle of my tarot story. And we're in like 2013 or 2014. And I'd been dabbling in tarot for, a couple of decades, but never really learned the system, never really dove into the history, the tradition, the card meanings, whatever. And so one day I just thought to myself, you know what? I am going to learn how to read tarot. I really want to. I want to read cards. And I thought, I don't think the Mother Peace or the Herbal Tarot or Daughters of the Moon are the right decks for this. Because I noticed over those years I had collected a few tarot books, and I noticed that most of the tarot books that I read were Rider-Waite-Smith based. So I thought, all right, Liz, if you're going to learn this system, you're going to just have to bite the bullet and get a Rider-Waite-Smith. So I didn't like the traditionally colored Rider-Waite deck so much. So I got this one, the Radiant Rider-Waite Tarot. It's a recoloring. It's a U.S. Games. I mean, look at this box. It's like who've lost the top. But anyway, so I've just pulled out a few cards. You all know what these look like. Here's the Ace of Swords, Wands, Cups, Pence. And I pulled these 4 cards out because I find them so interesting. The Knights. So we go from the most active to then the second most active, third most active, and then this one is no movement at all, completely still, the Knight of Pence. And, you know, one thing I noticed about the Rider-Waite-Smith deck was a lot of the cards I didn't even have to look up in a book. I could look at the cards and pretty much, okay. I mean, I look at these cards and I understand what they mean, or at least a meaning. I mean, it's obvious. I don't really need to look in a guidebook to figure out what these cards mean. And so when I first started reading the Radiant Rider-Waite-Smith deck, I was like, wow, this is so much easier. I should have started with a Rider-Waite-Smith deck. Gee. As I became familiar with the Rider-Waite-Smith by studying it and using it every day and reading books about it, I realized when I would look at the Mother Peace deck that there were allusions in that book or nods in that deck, I'm sorry, not book, in that deck, to Rider-Waite-Smith. So some of the cards were very much Rider-Waite-Smith-ish, and some weren't at all. Daughters of the Moon, not so much. The suits have different names, and there's only 3 court cards in each suit, Mother, Maiden, Crone. So it's not really Rider-Waite-Smith derivative. Like Mother Peace is. But of course, I didn't realize that until I got to this point. So I got Joan Bunning's book, Learn Tarot, How to Learn Tarot. That book was my source, and this deck was my source. So I started January 1st. I'm going to say it was 2024. I don't think it was 2023, 2024. And I said, I'm going to learn this. I'm going to learn this system. I'm going to learn how to read tarot. I'm going to pull a card every day and for a year. And I have to say, I did. I kept a journal. And when I looked back at the end of the year, there were 6 days out of 365 days that I didn't pull. And those days were mostly back then I was traveling for work, so a lot. So those were usually days that I was traveling all day, so that's why I didn't pull. But I had to say, as an Aries sun and a sanguine personality temperament, I was really, really proud of myself that I stuck with that. And halfway through the year, I thought, okay, now I need to pull more than 1 card a day because I can't read just 1 card. So then I went to 3 cards a day. And so for the second half of the year, I pulled 3 cards a day. I just pulled out the Hermit because I love that card. And I am a star strength. So I pulled out these 2 cards. I don't know if you notice I have my star earrings on. So that was my middle. That was how I really became a tarot reader. I deepened my practice. I learned how to read the cards. You know, all of us who are tarot readers and serious students of tarot know that we'll never stop studying and learning every day, either on YouTube or in a book or just, pulling cards myself. I learned something new, or doing a reading for someone, I learned something new. So tarot is a lifetime study. I'll never stop studying tarot. And it's my passion. I love it. One of the things that also was I guess I'll call it a milestone more than a middle, but it did contribute to deepening my practice, was right around this time when so I'd say 2015, I went to my first tarot conference. And the conference I went to was called the Reader Studio, and it was in New York City. And I don't live that far from New York, so I drove down. I knew no one, zero. I was just going. I wanted to learn. I wanted to be around tarot people. So I went, and I was like, oh, well, I'll spend the nights in my hotel room by myself reading my books there, whatever. But I got there and people were so friendly. I mean, people would come up to you and say, hey, hi, how you doing? You have your little badge on and, oh, want to do a reading? Yeah, I'll do a reading for you. You want to do a reading for me? And there were all these famous people there, Rachel Pollack, Mary Kay Greer, I don't know, Robert M. Place, a couple of my heroes who I'll get to as deck milestones were there selling their decks. And I met so many people that, I was a little starstruck, but everybody was so friendly. And there wasn't a sense of hierarchy. The herbal conference I mentioned that I went to was hierarchical. Like the students didn't sit at the tables during meals with the teachers. But at Reader Studio, it was nothing like that. Everybody just intermingled with each other. It was really quite lovely. And the folks that ran that conference were Ruth Ann and Wald Amberstone. And they did a wonderful job of setting the atmosphere for that. And how you start off Reader Studio is you do a reading for you're sitting at these tables and I had to pick a perfect stranger because I knew no one. So I did a reading for someone and they did a reading for me. And that was the first thing we did after, welcome and all that. And then so that was Friday, Saturday, and then Sunday, the last thing you do on Sunday is you find that person and you do pull out those same exact cards and you do the reading over again, incorporating things that you learned over the weekend. And you can see, is there a difference in the reading? And that was just so cool. So anyway, Reader Studio was also something that deepened my tarot practice because I, interacted with people that were really gifted and advanced tarot readers and book publishers and deck creators. And, that was really amazing. I also discovered at Reader Studio this thing you may have heard of called Tarot Tube. I didn't know. Well, that was the beginning of the end for me. I went home and, for the next couple of years, almost every night, I was on Tarot Tube watching a new creator and buying a new deck because so many of the videos I watched were deck reviews. And one of the things that I learned about on Tarot Tube was that there are these things called vintage decks. And there are all kinds of versions of Rider-Waite-Smith. So I heard about this deck. It might have even been on Simon's channel. I don't know. It might have been. Called the Hoi Polloi. And, I have the Trumps in, oh, I see. I have this device. I'm like, what is, I must have, oh, I know. I pulled the Trumps out for a project I was working on. So anyway, I saw people posting this deck and I was like, oh my gosh, how cool is that darn deck? So this is a Milestone deck. I gotta get it. So this guy that I had met at Reader Studio posted online on somebody else's video. I have 2 copies of Hoi Polloi for sale. If you're interested, let me know. So I thought, you know, I know him. I met him. I talked to him at Reader Studio. I can trust him. So I reached out to him and we went back and forth and settled on a price. It was just the deck. I didn't show this in my, but 6 of Swords is one of my favorite cards. It wasn't the box and all the other stuff that came with the Hoi Polloi. It was just the deck in this little velvet bag. So I got that. And that kind of started me off on sort of a Rider-Waite clone and collecting vintage and, oh boy, I don't know, YouTube. You've definitely dented my wallet. Oh. So the next Milestone deck is also a Rider-Waite Smith, and it's called Pamela Coleman Smith, RWS Tarot. It's by Lo Scarabeo. And I forget when this came out, but when it came out, US Games still had their patent, trademark, whatever, on Rider-Waite Smith. And so you could not get this deck in the States. Believe me, I tried. I went on Amazon France and I went on Amazon UK and I tried to be tricky and I'd get through, yay, the ordering process, and then as soon as I put my address on, cannot be delivered to your country. So, look at look at the coloration in this deck. I'm like, I gotta get this deck. I gotta get this deck. So as fate would have it, I was going to spend the holidays with family in the UK. So I went on Amazon UK and I ordered this deck. And I had it sent to my cousin's house where I was spending the holidays. And that is how I got this deck. And I am so glad to have it to this day. I just love the coloration in this deck. It's so gorgeous. It makes me so happy. So, you know, I got this deck. And I don't think so you can still get a deck that's called Pamela Coleman Smith RWS Tarot, but I don't think it's that same coloration. I'm not sure. Someone comment below if you know, but I don't know. So I want to talk, I'm sorry, I knew this was going to be long. I wanted to talk quickly about 2 other Milestone decks. And the first one that came to me was this one. It was I got the, I think it was Llewellyn version of this deck. And it is the Gaian Tarot by Joanna Powell Colbert. And I was fortunate enough to meet Joanna at that first Reader Studio I went to. She was selling her artwork and her decks. And at her vendor table, I saw that she had these Gaian Tarot limited edition, and I think she said she made of 1,000. I have copy 878 of 1,000. So I didn't buy it at the Reader Studio because I just was buying too many other things. But when I got home, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Like I said, I already had the Llewellyn version Oh, I love this. I love this. The Hierophant called the teacher. As an herbalist, you can imagine why I would love that. I don't know if you can see it, but I have the print of it back there on my wall. So after a while, I thought about it, and I just thought, you know what? I'm going to get that. So I did. And it was the most expensive tarot deck I had ever bought. But you know, that was 10 years ago. I still have it. I love it. I don't regret it. It's a collector's item. I use my Llewellyn deck more often than I use this deck, but I still am glad I have it. I love it. It's beautiful. You know, and when I really want to look at the cards, you can see how big it is. You can really get a good view when you pull that up. And Joanna sent with this, you got the deck. She made this bag. There was a guidebook. She put in a crystal. She put in a little herbal bundle from where she lives in on the West Coast of the U.S. And I have a little pendant. You could pick the major arcana you wanted on your pendant, and mine is strength, because as I mentioned, I'm a star strength. So that is a Milestone deck. And that's still one of my most used, most loved favorite decks. And then the other one, and Lisa was also at Reader Studio, is the Tarot de Saint Croix. And you can see this box is faded and beat up. And after I got this deck, I used it every day for, almost a year. And it's what I call fluffy. It's all broken in, and I love this deck so much. I love the colors. I know some people say they don't like the borders, the orange borders, but they're not really orange. They're terracotta. And Lisa is from New Mexico, and this is very much a color that makes sense if you are from. Look at the color in that Magician, the sky. Oh my God, and the Six of Swords. Oh, I just love this. Love, love, love. And this is also a deck that I would never, ever want to lose. I use it still to this day. I also bought her new edition, the borderless matte one, and I like that one too. I tend to pull this one out in the summer because I feel like it's got these really summer colors. So now, I guess that brings me to now. The decks that I'm using now. Well, I have another Milestone deck that actually relates to my now decks. So this is Jean Noblet Tarot. And for years I thought, gee, I learned how to read tarot by studying Rider-Waite-Smith. I really should learn the other systems. I tried Thoth, and sorry, no can do. I tried, but that Crowley energy just did me in. Anyway, so I tried. I got Ben Dove's book, which is, I think, really good, and I got a couple of Marseille decks, and I don't know, the color palette, the googly eyes, it just didn't work for me. So anyway, my great-grandmother was from Marseille. And last fall, I went to France with a friend of mine whose daughter lives in France and is married to a French guy. And we went to visit them. And I said, any chance we could go to Marseille while we're visiting? That's where my great-grandmother's from, and I want to buy a Tarot de Marseille in Marseille. And none of these people are tarot people, and they were all like, okay, sure. So my friend went online and found a tarot shop in Marseille, and we went to Marseille, and we found the shop, and I got this deck. So I got a Tarot de Marseille deck from in Marseille. And so that's kind of cool. I haven't used it a lot, and I'll tell you why when I get to my current decks. But I decided this is going to be my deck for Ancestral, working for my maternal side of the family, because it was my mother's mother, who's from Marseille. And then one last Milestone deck. It's in a pouch. This is what I would call my unicorn deck. I never, ever, ever thought that I would get this deck. I really wanted it for so long, years and years and years and years. But every time I looked online, the price was $1,000, $1,200, $1,500, $1,700. And I'm like, I don't have a spare $1,500, but even if I did, I'm not going to spend $1,500 on a tarot deck. I'm just not. I just am not. But anyway, one day, someone who knew that I was searching for this, it's the Greenwood, said, Liz, quick, go to make playing cards. Someone posted the files for the Greenwood. So I went to make playing cards, and sure enough, there it was. I think it was $50. So I had it printed and sent out, and I to this day, I still cannot believe that I have the Greenwood Tarot. And this I'm going to use as my Ancestral Tarot for my paternal family, who are from Scotland. And so I feel I did a reading with this just to kind of check in and see if it was the right deck for that. And yes, in fact, it is. So I got my unicorn deck. It's a copy. It's not an original, but I don't care. I don't need an original. I'm just happy, so happy to have this deck. And someone just reached out to me maybe a couple weeks ago and said they saw that Mark Ryan had, I don't know, maybe he settled his differences with Cheska Potter's family. You know, Cheska Potter was the artist of the Greenwood. But apparently in the next month or so, there's going to be a Kickstarter for another edition of the Greenwood. Now, will it really happen? I don't know, because there's been a whole lot of rumors about that over the years, and it never happened. So we'll see. I guess there's a Facebook group, and a friend of mine's in that Facebook group, and Mark Ryan is saying this is going to happen. We'll see. I don't know. If it does, I'll back it. But otherwise, I don't really need to, because I have my copy, so I'm happy. So now, this is the deck that opened the door for me for Tarot de Marseille. And it is the Gay Marseille by Charlie Claire Burgess. And, I know numerology, I know elements. I can read a card like this. But Charlie has made this deck a modern day, inclusive, radical deck. And you can see it's not just, there's little hints in the pips about what they're about. Look at the color palette. No googly eyes. And the color palette is gorgeous. Yay! Look at it. It's so pretty. I wonder if I'll get to the knight on the pink horse. Anyway, this is the deck I have been, oh, the Justice. This is the deck that now I have been using. I used it for the entire month of December for Kelly Bear's Tarot Advent project, which was really fun. And I'm now using it in February because of the color palette. And Charlie's guidebook has now become my Marseille Tarot guidebook. Any Tarot de Marseille deck that oh God, look at that, that I use other than this one, which is rare because mainly I just use this one. I use Charlie's guidebook. So that is one of the decks that I am using now that I am passionate about. I love it. I get amazing readings from it. It speaks to me not only in terms of my spiritual work, my spiritual practice, my tarot practice, but also to my social activist side of myself. And the other deck that I am using so much now, and is one of my favorites now, and I really can't see putting it down anytime soon, is also by Charlie-Claire Burgess, and it's the Fifth Tarot. And this is a Rider-Waite-Smith derivative. This is the the Gay Marseille is the Kickstarter. I didn't do the Kickstarter or the indie version of the Fifth Spirit Tarot, and I kind of wish I did. But anyway, now Hay House has released it. And this deck, man, the readings that I get are incredible. I've gone through some life changes and some trauma over the past couple years, and this deck kicks my butt when I need to be kicked and hugs my heart when I need to be hugged, and has been shining a light on my personal growth and evolution and my tarot journey. And I adore this deck. I adore Charlie-Claire Burgess' deck. I adore their book, Radical Tarot. I'm a total fangirl of Charlie. Their work just speaks to me. So, woo-wee, that's a lot. I'm going to end here. I have several other decks I was going to talk about, but you know what? Enough is enough. So, thank you to Simon for starting this wonderful tag. I am so thrilled to have stumbled upon it, thanks to Tammy. And I'm going to go watch other people's as they pop up. It's just so lovely to hear people's stories and how we journey from one deck to another. It's fascinating, really. So I wanted to say that I was going to film this deck, get this card, film this video yesterday, but I waited until today because today is February 16th, and it is our beloved Pixie's birthday. So happy birthday, Pixie. I hope somehow you know how much your beautiful deck means to so many people. I recently read that there are over 100 million copies of the Rider-Waite-Smith deck sold in 20 different countries. So that's quite a legacy. Anyway, thank you again for watching. Thank you, Simon and Tammy, for doing this video, and peace and love.